Hello everybody and welcome to Daf Yomi. I'm sorry again that we're not fully back to live sessions on Zoom, but until I know that I'm fully restored and repaired, I thought it's better just to make sure that it's pre-recorded rather than run the risk of not being available at the time of 9:30 on a Sunday morning. So yeah, hopefully I'll try. Please God, be made for next Sunday to be back on track with all of that, and I hope we'll be able to be together once again live on Zoom. Okay, today we're doing Daf Mem Gimel, page 43 of Maseches Pesachim, and in true Nick style, we're starting with the Mishnah on page 42. So we started the third chapter of Masechet Pesachim, which we started only yesterday. So let's take a look at the Mishnah, and then that will catch us up for today's daf, all being well. It's not the easiest daf I've ever had to do, but as always, I'll do my best, and we'll see how we go. Says the Mishnah, towards the bottom of page 42a. Ve'elu ovrin b'Pesach, and these types of foods, if a person has these types of foods in their possession over Pesach, then they will be transgressing the prohibition of owning chametz on Pesach. The examples that the Mishnah lists are kutach habavli, which is a Babylonian dish known as kutach, which is basically made with like moldy bread and milk or something like that. But apparently it was quite the delicacy back in ancient Babylonia. So there's kutach habavli, there's sheikhar hamadi, which is Median beer, chometz ha'adomi, Edomite vinegar, zaysom ha'mitzri, Egyptian zaysom, which is a type of beer or medicinal potion, zoman shel tzavayin, dyer's broth, some kind of mixture that dyers would use for dyeing garments, milan shel tavachim, which translates on the screen there as baker's well-worked dough, the kolan shel sofrim, and some kind of paste that was used by sofrim, by scribes. Rabbi Eliezer Omer aftach shitei nashim. Rabbi Eliezer adds in there women's jewellery, which we're going to get to in just a couple of moments. Spoiler alert, if you're looking on the screen there, is where the Gemara ends up concluding. Zeh haklal, this is the principle. Kol shehu mimin dagan, anything that is of a grain derivative, anything that is derived from grains, harei zeh over b'Pesach, you're going to violate the prohibition of owning chametz on Pesach if you have these things in your possession. But the items listed in our Mishnah, harei elu ba'azhara ve'ein b'hem mishum kares. So these dishes and substances are included in the warning, i.e., they are included in the biblical prohibition of owning chametz on Pesach. But if a person was to eat them, there would be no kares, there would be no spiritual excision in punishment. So that is our Mishnah on 42a, and now let's jump to the very, very bottom of 42b, the last line or two of our page there, where the Gemara picks up on Rabbi Eliezer's words, Aftach shitei nashim v'chulei. Rabbi Eliezer includes in his list of problematic substances tachshitei nashim. Tachshitim are usually translated as jewellery, women's jewellery, but the Gemara asks, Tachshitei nashim sal kadaitach, do we really mean women's jewellery? Does it make sense that a necklace made out of metal could be causing us to violate the prohibition of having chametz in our possession? Ella, says the Gemara, rather, ema afti pule nashim. Say that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is actually with relation to women's cosmetics, in which case, as we know, there could be issues of chametz. If in the foundation creams or other types of lotions and potions there are ingredients that would be considered chametz, these could very well raise a problem for us on Pesach. Just one moment. Let's. Very good. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because Rav Yehuda said, quoting Rav, Belos Yisrael, when it comes to Jewish women, Shegiu Lepirkan, that have reached the age of physical maturity, even if they haven't yet reached the age of maturity in terms of becoming a Gedolah, in terms of becoming Bas Mitzvah. So, Benos Aniyim, when it comes to poor girls, Toflos Osam Basid, they would smear sid, which is lime, in order to remove cosmetically any hair and to soften their skin. So if they were poor, they would use lime. Benos Ashirim, if they were rich, Toflos Osam Basoles, they would use flour. There you go. That would be a chametz-based cosmetic, which could well be a problem on Pesach. And Benos Malachim b'Shemen Amor, and daughters of kings would use myrrh, oil of myrrh. Shneimar, as it says in the pasuk, from the cosmetic treatment of the women at the time of Queen Esther, Shisha Chadashim b'Shemen Hamor. That for 6 months they would anoint and smear themselves with myrrh oil. My Shemen Hamor. What is Shemen Hamor? Rav Huna bar Yirmiyah Omer Sateches. Rav Huna bar Yirmiyah says it is Sateches, which is oil of myrrh. Although it remains untranslated on the screen here. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Shemen Zayis Shelo Hevishlish. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Shemen Hamor is actually olive oil made with olives that have not yet reached a third of their growth. So it's unripe olives being crushed and turned into oil, which would apparently be quite cosmetically effective. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, there's a brayso where Rabbi Yehuda says, Anpiknin is Shemen Zayis Shelo Hevishlish, that the substance known as anpiknin is olive oil made from olives that have not yet grown a third. Why would people use it to anoint their bodies? Because it causes unwanted hairs to fall out, and it would smooth the texture of the skin. Zehaklal, quoting the Mishnah again, this is the general rule. Kol shehu min dagan, anything which is a grain derivative is going to be forbidden. Tanya, says the Baraisa, Amar Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua says, V'chi ma'acha sheshaninu kol shehu min dagan, harei ze over b'Pesach, lama manu chachamim eseili. If we have learnt in our Mishnah that anything which is a grain-based product is going to cause us to violate the prohibition of owning chametz on Pesach, why were the chachamim careful to actually list specific substances? Why not just say anything that's a grain product is going to be a problem? So the Gemara answers, in order that people should become familiar with these items and familiar with their names, and so it would become familiar and well known and publicized to people that there are specific types of things that have a grain content and would pose a problem on Pesach, or would possibly save them from other such issues. What could another issue be? Says the Gemara, Ki hata hahu ba ma'arava ikla lebavel, because once there was an Israelite, someone came from the west, someone came from Eretz Yisrael to visit Bavel. Hava bisra bahade, he had some meat with him. Amalei krivu li matchilta, he asked him to bring a dip, something, a condiment that he could have with his bread. Shama de ka'amri karivu le kutach, he overheard the people saying, oh, let's bring him some kutach to have with his meat. But kevan de shama kutach perish. But because he had heard the word kutach, and because he had known our Mishnah, he knew that kutach was milky. And since it was milky, he knew he had to run away and get away from that product because he was planning to have it with meat. So that is why it's important for us to know what these things are and to list them explicitly to prevent any such incidents. Continuing with the quote from the Mishnah, Harei Elu Ba'azhara, that all of these items are included in what we are warned to not have in our possession over Pesach, but there's no chi of kares, there's no liability for kares if a person was to eat them. Asks the Gemara, Man tama the chametz dagan gamer al yedei taroves v'noksha be'eineha belav. Who is the Tana? Who is the author of the statement that chametz dagan gamer, that if you have full-fledged chametz, which is mixed in with something else, that should also be prohibited? Or v'noksha be'einei belav, and not only that, noksha be'einei, which translates on the screen as hardened leaven, but it basically is defective chametz. Right? It was dough, but it never completed fermenting. So how do we know that defective chametz or defective dough and full-fledged chametz, which has been mixed in with something else, that these things are also going to be included in the prohibition? Who is the Tana? Who is the person who says such a thing? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda, quoting Rav, says, Rabbi Meir. This is none other than the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Titania, because he says in the Baraisa, Siur, when it comes to Siur or Seor, which is when the surface of the dough has turned white, but it hasn't developed cracks. So before this stage, it's not chametz at all, but from this stage, it could well be considered chametz. So when it comes to seur, if you've got this dough, which it's also defective, what should you do with it? So says the Baraisa, seur yisaref. You should burn it. You should burn this seur. Can't use it. The nosno lekalba. And you can give it to your dog. And if a person was to eat this seor, then they would be lashed with 40 lashes. Asks the Gemara, Hagufa Kasha. This whole statement here is one big walking contradiction. Omart seor yisaref. You said that this seor has to be burned. Alma asur b'hana'ah. That tells us then that it is prohibited and forbidden to derive any benefit from it. Tani, but then you went and taught us you can go and give it to your dog. In which case it's permissible to have benefit from it. Well, which is it? Either the chametz is going to be forbidden to benefit from because it's chametz and it's forbidden, or it's going to be permitted. But which is it? You can't have it both ways. Hachika amar. So this really is what the Baraisa is saying. I'll try and explain this clearly. Seur yisaref. When we said that seur has to be burnt, so the Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says that it has to be burnt if it is seur, according to his definition. The Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Yehuda has a different definition of what seur is. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it is his seur, according to his definition, then it has to be burnt. But when the Baraisa said v'nosno lifnei kalba, that you can give it to your dog, implying that it is permitted to benefit from it, that is the Rabbi Meir, that is Rabbi Meir's opinion with regards to the seur of the Rabbi Yehuda. The way that Rabbi Yehuda would define seur is not the same way that Rabbi Meir would define seur. He's much stricter, which would mean then that the seur that Rabbi Yehuda defines is actually permissible to feed to your dog, according to Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't, but according to Rabbi Meir, he's stricter. And the quote that we said of a person who eats it being liable to 40 lashes, that we attribute to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. and that is the seor of Rabbi Huda. Okay, so whereas you might be permitted to give it to a dog, you can't eat it yourself. If you were to eat it yourself, according to Rabbi Meir, he would say that you're liable to 40 lashes. Shaminan lei. So what we have learned is that the Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, nokshe be'enei belav, that this defective chametz is included in the prohibition. V'kol shekein chametz dagan gamur al yedei taroves, and all the more so full-fledged chametz which has been mixed in with something else, something that you'd actually be allowed to eat on Pesach. So that is why it's a bit of a chiddush, it's a bit of a novelty to say that that you are not allowed to eat these things and that they are definitely included in chametz. Rav Nachman Amar, Rav Nachman says, Rabbi Eliezer here. It's not the opinion of Rabbi Meir, as we were just saying. It's actually the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, to Tanya, because he has a brisa. Al chametz dagan gamur anush kares. There is a penalty of kares, of spiritual excision, for chametz, which is full-fledged chametz. Al eruva belav, divrei Rabbi Eliezer. If it was mixed in with something else and it contains this chametz, then you would be punished just for violating a prohibition, but you wouldn't have the chiyuv of kares. Chachamim say, al chametz dagan gamur anosh kares. For eating full-fledged chametz, there's the punishment of kares. Al eruva b'lo klum. But according to the Chachamim, there would be no violation of eating something of full-fledged chametz, which is not that there's no violation, that there's no punishment for eating full-fledged chametz which has been mixed in with something else. Ushaminan lei, and what we learn from here is Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, da'amar chametz dagan gamur al yedei taroves belav, that a person who eats full-fledged chametz mixed in with something else, then they are going to have violated, but they won't be punished with kares. But kol shekei nokshe beinei, and all the more so with regard to this defective chametz, this hardened leaven, which is clearly visible, but it's not mixed with anything else, that is going to be included as well. For Rav Nachman, now let's try and analyze why this one says this way and this one says the other way. Let's have a little look, see if we can understand this. But Rav Nachman, what about Rav Nachman? My tama lo amak Rav Yehuda. Why doesn't Rav Nachman hold the same way as Rabbi Yehuda? Rav Yehuda had said it was Rabbi Meir's opinion. Okay, so why don't they agree? What does Rav Nachman see that Rav Yehuda didn't see? Amalach, we would say to you, Dilma akan lo ka'ama Rabbi Meir Hasan ela nokshe be'enei. So the extent to which Rabbi Meir would feel like you are violating the Torah, the prohibition, that would be with nokshe be'enei. That would be with this defective chametz. Aval chametz dagan gamur al yedei taroves lo. But full-fledged chametz, which has been mixed in with something else, that is not just a small problem, that is a big problem. V'Rav Yehuda ma'itama lo amar Rav Nachman. And why does Rav Yehuda not agree with Rav Nachman? Why did they not come to the same conclusion? Amar lach ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer only goes as far as to say ela chametz dagan gamur al yedei taroves, with regards to full-fledged chametz which has been mixed in with something. Aval nokshe be'enei lo amar. But with regards to this defective chametz, he did not extend his prohibition as far as that. He would say that you're allowed to eat hardened leaven. Tanya Kavase de Rav Yehuda, there's a baraisa in accordance with Rav Yehuda's opinion. Says the pasuk, Kol machmesetz lo tochelu, that all leavened items you may not eat. Lerabos kutach habavli, this would include in that prohibition the Babylonian kutach dish, the sheikhar hamidi, and Median beer, the chometz haidomi, Edomite vinegar, zeisem mitzri, this potion, this Egyptian potion. Yachol yehi anosh kares. So I might think that there should be a punishment of kares for a person who eats these things. Talmud lomar, says the pasuk, Ki kol ochel chametz v'nichrasa. Anybody who eats chametz shall get kares. Al chametz dagum gamor and anosh kares. For a person who eats full-fledged chametz, the punishment is kares. Val eruvo, but if these were just mixtures, which these other items are, then belav, then you're only violating the prohibition, but you're not going to be chayav kares. Man shamas leida ama ala eruva belav. Who do you hear from who says that eating the mixture is violating a prohibition? Answers this baraisa, Rabbi Eliezer. It's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Ve'ilu noksha be'enei lo ka'amar, and the fact that we've not been speaking about this defective chametz, shema mina noksha Rabbi Eliezer leisle. This would imply that in Rabbi Eliezer's world, there's no prohibition of eating this defective chametz. Rabbi Eliezer eruva balav minale. So where does Rabbi Eliezer learn out the prohibition of eating these mixtures? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, Kol machmetzet lo tachelu. Any leavened things you should not eat. Ihachi kares nami lechayev. If that's the case, then why would he not hold that there is a punishment of kares? Tahak kasiv ki kol ochel machmetzet v'nikrasa. Because the verse says that anyone who eats leavened items is going to be cut off. Hahu mibaile. He needs the lesson from this pasuk of ki kol ochel machmetzes v'nichrasa, of anybody who eats anything will be cut off. He needs it for the following lesson. Lichtitanya, because it says in the baraisa, machmetzes, anything leavened, ainli ela shenis chametz me'elav, anything which has been sorry, we've missed a little bit over here on the screen. So anything that has become leavened on its own. Machmatz davar acher minayim. From where would he know that something that has become leavened on account of other factors, that these are also going to be prohibited? Talmud lomar, kol machmeset v'nichrasa, because the verse says anything leavened and you shall be cut off, indicating, teaching us that food that becomes chametz due to other factors is still considered chametz, and you should be given kares. Ihachi, if that's the case, the lav nami lahachi hudasa. If so, if that's what we're trying to say, then the lav nami lahachi hu da'asa. If that is the case, that anything, when the verse says that anything leavened is referring to any type of chametz, even if it's mixed in with something else, then that would mean that I would have to say that then when this same phrase appears with regards to the prohibition of kol machmesetz, which also came up, right? We had kol machmesetz los sochedu, you should not eat it, and then we had kol ochel machmesetz kol ochel machmetzes v'nifrasa, that anybody who eats leavened things will be cut off. So then I have to use it for that purpose as well. I have to use it for there as well. And so the fact that he hasn't means that there is no violation for eating things which are leavened on account of other things, which have become chametz on account of other things. Ella, Taima de Rabbi Eliezer mikol. Rather, the reason for Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is because he derives that halacha from the word kol. Hasam nami haksiv kol. Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have a problem, because over there it also used the word kol. So over there it also used the word kol when it was talking about being cut off, having the punishment of kares. So hahu mibayle lerabos esanashim. The Gemara answers that Rabbi Eliezer learns a different lesson from the word kol with regards to being cut off, and he learns that even women are going to receive the punishment of kares if they eat chametz on Pesach. So So that's where Rabbi Eliezer gets his lesson of kol. That's what he uses it for. He learns that women are to be included as well. The Gemara says, Nashim with the Rav Yehuda Amarav Nafka. But you can learn the inclusion of women from the teaching of Rav Yehuda quoting Rav. The Amarav Yehuda Amarav, because Rav Yehuda said, quoting Rav, V'chein Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, and similarly it was taught in the academy of Rabbi Yishmael, Amakra. The verse says, Ish or Isha ki yasu mikol chatas adam. A man or a woman. When a man or a woman do any of the sins of man, meaning when either a man or a woman commit a sin, and we see over there hishva hakas of ish li isha, that the Torah equates men and women. Look, kol onshin Torah, with regards to all punishments in the Torah. So if there is a punishment of kares, then it should include the women as well, as we see that it does in this other teaching. And as we turn the page, the Gemara says, it was necessary to for Rabbi Eliezer to specifically have an opinion about women, because otherwise you can enter your mind to say, that when the verse says, do not eat chametz, and for 7 days you should eat matzahs, so kol sheyeshno b'kom achol matzah, yeshno b'bal tachal chametz. So anybody who is included in the positive mitzvah of eating matzah is going to be included as well in the prohibition of eating chametz. V'hani nashi, women, hoil v'leisnu b'kom achol matzah, since they are not directly included in the mitzvah of eating matzah, tahavale mitzvahs aseh shazman gramehi, because women, as we are taught in several places, are not obligated in time-bound mitzvahs, and since eating matzah is a time-bound mitzvah, then they're not going to be directly included in the mitzvah of eating matzah. And if they're not directly included in the mitzvah of eating matzah, so then we might be tempted to think, it might enter our minds to say that women are not included in the prohibition of eating chametz. Kamash Milan, however, the Gemara says, this comes to teach us that actually they are. The fact that the Kamash Milan, this comes to teach us, therefore, that anybody who is cautioned with regards to eating chametz is included in the mitzvah of eating matzah. And now that we are including women on account of the prohibition of eating chametz, so then we should include them in the positive mitzvah of eating matzah, like the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says, Nashim chayvas b'achilas matzah davar Torah. It is a biblical concept that women are obligated to eat matzah. Shneimar, as it says, lo tochal alav chametz, that you should not eat chametz. So this was a verse we brought just a moment ago. Don't eat chametz, and 7 days you should eat matzos. Kol sheyeshnu b'bal tochal chametz. Anybody who is included in the prohibition of eating chametz, yeshnu b'achilas matzah, is included in the positive mitzvah of eating matzah. V'hani nashi, women, nami hoil v'yeshna b'bal tochal chametz, since they are subject to the prohibition of not eating chametz, yeshna b'kum achol matzah, they are included in the positive mitzvah of eating matzah. Asks the Gemara though, my chazis tahai kol l'rabui nashim umafekes erubo. So why, the Gemara asks, why were you led to the conclusion that the word kol is coming to include women and excluding mixtures? Why was that your conclusion? Ema l'rabui erubo mistabra kai ema l'rabui erubo. Why not say instead that it was coming to include mixtures that are also going to be forbidden? Mistavra is logical. Kai ba'ochlin, mar ba'ochlin. The logic is that since we're talking about eating, so mar ba'ochlin, so we're going to include people who eat. Kai ba'ochlin, mar ba'nechalin. you expect the lesson to be that if the verse is based on eating, that we're now going to include things that are being eaten, that would be illogical, answers the Gemara. Maskifla, Rav Nassan Avuha de Rav Huna. But Rav Nassan, the father of Rav Huna, so he challenges this, he objects to this. Are you going to tell me now that we never have an instance in the whole of Shas, in the whole of the Gemara, in the whole of the Talmud, where we're talking about food being eaten and we don't include additional types of... Sorry, we're dealing with people who eat, things with those people who eat, and we don't come to include things which are being eaten? I'm going to give you an example right now. V'hatanya, but there's a baraisa. The verse says that anyone who eats the fat of the behema, of the animal, asher yakriv, which is offered to as a sacrifice, that's our pasuk. So that when I see those words, that will teach me in a very straightforward way, chelev tamimim shira'ui likarev, of fats of animals, tamimin, of unblemished animals that are fit to be sacrificed. However, continues this baraisa, chelev ba'alei mumin minayim. How am I to know that the Torah also had intended to include fats of ba'alei mumin, fats of blemished animals, which may not be offered? From where do I know that? Talmud lomar min habehema, because the pasuk said min habehema, of animals. So the Gemara continues, chelev chulin minayim. How do I know that even fats of non-consecrated animals? I also can't bring these things up. Talmud lomar ki kol, because the verse said ki kol. So he concludes from here. We see an example where the verse, on its simplest level, was talking about types of things that can be eaten. And then the examples that it brings to extend the scope of the prohibition, it wasn't coming to include people who eat, it was coming to include other types of animals and other types of things that get eaten. So there you see an example, says Rabbi Natan, of a concept in the Torah where the verse, on its simple meaning, meant one type of food, but then once we start to explore the verse and explore the words in the verse, we see that the extensions that come out of it are about other types of animals. And that's not what we were doing when we were exploring our pasuk just a few moments ago. We were saying that kol somehow includes women. Why should it include women? It should actually include forbidden mixtures. So that is Rabbi Natan's challenge. Answers the Gemara, Hasam deleka ochlin mar bene echalin. Hacha deika ochlin lo shavik lehu la ochlin umar bene echalin. So the Gemara answers that over there, with the animals which are being sacrificed, it's not talking about people eating at all, because we're not eating those sacrifices. So since there are no eaters to include, therefore you can look at these verses and you can learn lessons that extend it to other types of animals that are included. But over here, hacha de'ika ochlin, over here we are talking about people who are eating chametz. And that is why it doesn't make sense, says the Gemara, it doesn't make sense that we should abandon the concept of people who eat, such as women. And instead, we should use the verse to teach us about things that get eaten. This does not make sense, according to the answer in the Gemara. And that's why the teaching still stands, that it should include women in the scope of the prohibition of eating chametz. V'Rabbanan, asks the Gemara then, Rabbanan, when it comes to the Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? Deleis lehu erev, they did not anyway include mixtures in the prohibition. So kol lo darshi, and so they also do not interpret the word kol. So in that case, ela nashim manalahu. How do the rabbis know to include women in the prohibition? How do we know that they are forbidden from eating chametz? How do we know, according to the Rabbanan? Answers the Gemara, Kol lo darshi, even though they do not learn from the word specifically kol, anything, they do, however, learn from ki kol. The words in the pasuk which said ki kol, anyone who eats leaven, anyone who eats chametz, that was how the rabbis knew to include women. Well, if that's where the rabbis learn it, now we have to ask on Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbi Eliezer, Ema kol l'rabos es hanashim, he does learn women, that the prohibition extends to women from the word kol, ki kol, and from the words ki kol, l'rabos es eruva. He learns to include mixtures. In that case, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you eat mixtures, you would be chayev kares. V'chi tema ki kol Rabbi Eliezer lo darish. And if you want to say that Rabbi Eliezer didn't extend the prohibition to mixtures from the words ki kol, v'hatanya, but we have a baraisa, seor bal taktiru, we have a baraisa where the verse says seor bal taktiru, that yeah, so Vahatanya, but the Baraisa says Seor. There's a verse talking about the things which got offered up in the Beis Hamikdash, and mincha which got offered up in the Beis Hamikdash was not allowed to be made out of chametz, and it was not allowed to be burnt up if it was chametz. So over there, and with regards to that concept, the Baraisa said that Seor, when the verse says Seor, Einli elakulo, that we learn from those words that anything that is completely chametz is going to be prohibited. Miktsas or minayin. From where do we know, however, that even a part of it is chametz, and that's also not going to be allowed? Talmud loma kol eruva. Sorry. Talmud loma kol, because the verse said kol, any chametz, any seor is going to be forbidden. In which case, the Baraisa asked, in the context of this other topic, eruva minayin, how do we know that mixtures are also going to be prohibited? Talmud loma ki kol. And the Baraisa answers over there because the verse said ki kol, because all. Man shamas le de darish kol, Rabbi Eliezer, the kadarish ki kol. So who is the one over there who learnt the lesson from the word kol? That was Rabbi Eliezer. And nonetheless, he also learnt additional details from the word ki kol. So if he was doing it over there, why would you then want to say that he's not doing it over here? To which the Gemara answers, kasha. The Gemara concludes at this point that actually it is a big, big question as to why we would expect Rabbi Eliezer to learn the lessons that he learns in the context of mincha and not to apply the same with regards to chametz on Pesach. Whew. As I said, it's not the easiest daf, and that's where we're going to leave it for today. But I've done my best, and do continue to plumb the depths and try and get an understanding in your own way and in your own words. But we'll leave it there for today. Whew. And we'll pick it up next week, and hopefully you might be lucky. It might be a little bit easier. We're going to be finishing the third parak next Sunday and starting the fourth chapter. So there you go. Something to look forward to. In the meantime, I wish you all a wonderful, meaningful day and week ahead. Take care, everyone.